to Moves That Matter today. I have a little something different for you today. There was a show that I did just a couple of weeks ago that was so powerful that many people have asked to see it again. And so what I want to do is re-air that show for those who want to see it again. But also, I want to re-air that show to add some context to a new series I just started called How Racism Takes Place in the Thought of George Lipschitz. You want to see this again. So I'm going to re-air this again and come back to you next week after a little more context so we can do part 2 of our series, How Racism Takes Place in the Thought of George Lipschitz. Pay attention to this. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. And remember, hit share. Bye-bye. Hi, welcome to Moves That Matter. I am your host, Dr. Clyde Posley Jr., and I am excited about this show tonight. I'm going to be talking about social justice and the role of those who are concerned about oppression. When should we get involved? Does getting involved with social justice really matter? How do we get involved as the body of Christ? And what does God expect from us? You're not going to want to miss this show today. Now, I want to remind everyone, God bless you for the books that you've already bought, but it's 2 things I want to remind you about. I want to remind you about my book that's out most recently, More Than Icons and Images, Uncovering the Hidden Protest Narrative of the Black American Athlete in the 21st Century. You can get that on Amazon.com. You can go to my website and get it. People are still buying the book. I'm blessed. Just thank you for buying the book. Even in this COVID season, I thank you for that. But another thing I want to talk to you about is a project called First Shepherds. It's a ministry that was birthed from psychotherapist Kamish Nunley. And me and some other brothers are involved and sisters are involved as founding members of it. Pastor David Hampton, Deputy Mayor of Indianapolis, Pastor Jerry Davis, pastor of the Crossroads AME Church, Sister Butler, she's a pastor here in the city, and as well as myself, Dr. Clyde Posley. We are, along with Pastor Butler, Pastor Hampton, and Pastor Davis, led by Commissioner Nunley, started a ministry to hurting pastors called First Shepherds. Please be looking at my Facebook page, Commissioner Nunley's page, Pastor Shepard's page, Pastor Butler's, Renee Butler's page, and make sure that you pay attention to that. Your pastor could be able to benefit from some of the emotional help that comes from that, some of the stress that goes with it. That ministry is designed to get them some help, like a paraclete, like the Holy Spirit does to us, come alongside us. That ministry is designed to help pastors, leaders with the drudgery and stress and weight that keeps us sometimes burdened. There are pastors who are leaving their churches, committing suicide even, and just walking away from ministries or silently suffering as they serve the saints. I want you to benefit from that. I'll be right back with our theology and sociology session. Hit share. Share this. I'm going to be going there and doing some cutting conversation about social justice and what our responsibility is in the African American community, particularly people who claim to be kingdom workers. You do not want to miss this. Hit share, and I'll be right back. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. Silence is betrayal when it comes to social justice. I started this segment out with 2 quotes from the great late Dr. Martin Luther King about why it is never the right thing to do to be silent about social justice issues that are affecting your culture and your society. Recently, I was in a conversation on Facebook, and I've been in this conversation with other people, this similar conversation before, where it was suggested that as long as black-on-black crime is happening, namely murders of blacks against other blacks, that the work that we do in social justice relative to alleviating police brutality and other forms of racism really does not matter. I could not disagree more. Those two have nothing to do with each other. This segment today, this Moves That Matters podcast tonight, is about making sure that we never stop doing the one because the other has become so bad. Sometimes the mindset behind people who believe that as long as black on black crime is happening, our brothers are murdering other brothers, sometimes that mindset is a trick of the enemy perpetuated by whites who are racist and racist thought in general, to stop us from being as engaged as we need to be with the work of social justice, because those who hold that proponent are trying to talk people out of getting involved by using guilt to stop you from the work of social justice. Of course, murders in the high rate of murders in Indianapolis is something that ought to stop. The murders in Chicago, the murder rate in Dallas, the murder rate in New York, the murder rate in Atlanta and in Los Angeles is ridiculous. But should the work of social justice stop because there are injustices that are going on culturally? Should cultural injustice against its own culture stop social efforts to bring justice to the whole society? Of course it should not. We can never let ourselves get to the place where we believe that we have to act good enough to work in social justice, that we have to be perfect enough, pristine enough, that we have to have a certain amount of good behavior to qualify to speak out against injustice. We need to, let me tell you something. First of all, there won't ever be a time that there are enough people who are perfect enough for the work of social justice to go on. Because the truth of the matter is, injustice is happening because of the imperfection of people all over the world. So why should we have to become perfect to try to help people who are imperfect? At best, all social justice work that takes place by people who are flawed. Martin Luther King was flawed. He was not perfect. Marcus Garvey was not perfect. Malcolm X was not perfect and later admitted his own flaws. Stokely Carmichael was not perfect. The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, the Deacons of Defense that used to protect Dr. Martin Luther King, born out of Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama. These were deacons, these were men who were deacon in churches, but they were not perfect people. There's no such thing as a perfect person who is walking the face of the earth. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Why is this important, Pastor? It's important because it ought to keep us from thinking that there needs to be perfection in a culture before we can talk about the condition of society. What are some of the reasons what are some of the important thoughts about this notion of not getting involved, fixing our personal problems before we fix the social problems? Some of the notions that we need to consider are this. We need to learn as a people what the origin of black on black crime comes from. We as a people did not come here from Africa looking for ways to destroy our brothers. All behavior is learned behavior, and the way that murder starts to happen is when selfishness abides. When we allow selfishness, when we allow ourselves, or when we are trained to be more selfish, then murder is normally the offspring. And what happens when people become selfish and they only think about themselves, if murder becomes the offspring of that selfishness, then the persons who are in the closest proximity to you will be the ones who suffer the murder. Let me prove what I'm saying to you. You've heard of Cain and Abel, haven't you? Cain and Abel are a perfect example of what selfishness, and when you are or have become selfish or become a person who focuses only on yourself, how your people closest to you begin to suffer. Cain, who was the brother of Abel, had an offering, and so did Abel. But Abel's offering was sacrificed unto the Lord in a better spirit. And Cain did not have that type of offering because Cain was selfish and wanted all of God's presence and glory to himself and not to be shared with his brother. He killed his brother because of the quality of his brother's offering and tried to hide the covering that killing that he did. God came into the place where the murder took place and said these words, that the blood, said this to Cain, the blood of your brother cried out to me from the ground. Can I tell you something? That selfishness that we see in Cain, that led to him murdering his close proximity brother, is the kind of selfishness that was trained into the slave that was brought from the West Indies, that was brought from Africa, brought from Ghana. Slave masters, in an effort to perpetuate the slave industry, created intentional division among families. There are stories in a book I have called Slave Testimonies that prove that black men were trained and forced to have intercourse with their mother while their father watched, while their brothers watched. And one of the cuss words that we use that starts with an M, ends with an R, that term came from a particular type of slave that was made to be that, to create division between this black man and his father and this black man and his brother. And so violence of an emotional nature started with things like that. And then the policing of the black slave was done by black slaves. And the privilege to get to eat the food in the big house for doing these killings was given to the black buck, who would do the most policing and violence against his family. And so the nurturing of the disposition that violence against my close brother close in proximity to me, was set up in us and ingrained in our social DNA from the very start. So these black on black murders that you see is the offspring of a social group that has never been taught some of the tenets that I have just told. And so therefore, because black slave owners devalued the dark skin, according to Khalil Gibran Muhammad's book, professor at Harvard University, The Condemnation of Blackness, and according to Aubrey Hendricks' book, The Assassination of the Black Male Image, because that notion of black male image was devalued and degraded, and other slaves and black men were taught that you are nothing and those who look like you are nothing, then the notion of killing another black man that looks like you has never been able to take on the real damnable value that it needs to. So when you see a young black man kill another black man, one thing we know, no matter what they say caused it, is you could not possibly understand the real value and the impact of taking a black life or what a black life is if you're willing to take it without fear of the consequences. Because while that young black man may fear the consequences of going to jail, you are putting your life in prison maybe for life, but that's your life. Look at what you have done to the person the other black man whose life has been devastated. His mama has now got to bury her son. His daddy can never get to finish showing that son manhood. His sisters do not get to see the type of protection that they need. The entrepreneurial spirit and overall creativity in the DNA of his black ontology, his black existence, will never come to full fruition because you didn't value his life and you didn't value yours. And so you destroyed yours, his sisters, his mama, his brother, and if he had children, all these children, all this whole family's life is now influenced, all rooted in your lack of value in his life, of his black skin. That's one of the issues that has to be considered. We have to consider that. And another issue that has to be considered here is that the work of social justice, when we make statements like, as long as we're killing each other
the work of social justice we do really doesn't matter, or we need to worry more about black on black crime than we do blue on black crime. What you are really saying here is that we as black people are too ignorant to multitask. I know that's good stuff right there. I'm trying not to preach, Pastor, but I'm just trying to talk. But this is just the truth. Don't insult me as a black man, or don't insult your culture as a black culture like we can't multitask. We made the pyramids. We created a black man named Hammurabi created the world trade codes, and that are still in many ways used today in the Middle East. He was a black lawmaker in Sumeria, the land where Abraham was from. We made the Sphinx. We set up astrology. Those wise men, people say there were three, but there's no evidence that they were three. They just had three different gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So people think it was three. But those wise men that came to see Jesus, those were black men. They were astrologers, and astrology was something that was established by people of dark skin. We are creative. We have great brains. We are of a creative preacher. We made the cotton creative texture. We invented the cotton gin. We invented heart surgery. We invented the elevator. Y'all not saying what I'm saying. We invented the blue jean, so the denim jean. So the truth of the matter is we have the brains to multitask. We can deal with fighting the issues of black on black crime and the poor esteem that is often in our country, and deal with the fact that there are many police officers who are good, but there are others who are white supremacists who use their shield as a badge, their badge as a shield and a cloak for the unrighteousness, hatred that they have against people of brown skin. I don't believe all police officers are bad. I have police officers who are friends, and I know they're not racist. They're a child of God. I've had multiple conversations with them. But do not tell me that every person on the police force is happy-go-lucky and glad about having to confront the black male image when it's not functioning properly. But there needs to be a balance. But don't insult our intelligence like we cannot multitask. We have the ability to deal with black on black crime while we deal with the onslaught of domestic violence from post-traumatic slave disorder. We have the ability to raise our children and give them images of powerful black women and powerful black men while we at the same time stand against the open, outright racism of Donald Trump and his S-hole nation's comments and his willingness to leave people who are in a pandemic in a cage right now on the border. We have the ability to fight for our right to vote and stop voter suppression, while at the same time fight to get true tracing and true testing into the black culture of our people. We have the ability to perpetuate the notions of Dr. Martin Luther King and the understanding of Malcolm X and the entrepreneurship of Marcus Garvey, and understand the importance of the Pulitzer Prize awarded to the granddaughter of Ida B. Wells in her research of her grandmother's book, The Southern Lynchings, while at the same time understand the value of Oprah Winfrey and the importance of Magic Johnson making $100 million available to those who did not get those SBA loans, Small Business Association loans. We have the ability to multitask. Please stop insulting black intellect like we can only do one thing at a time. Our brains are capable of perpetuating a multiplicity of viable issues at the same time. We are splendiferously clad with brain cells that have habits of morality, ethics, and that can function in deontologistic ways as well as teleologistic ways. We are the hope of the slave. So we're not dumb, and we can multitask. Another thing that's important, please don't let your theology be practiced in the black culture based on how people say it should be practiced who don't have the ills of your culture. Do not allow people to tell you how to handle people that you have lived with every day when they have no real experience with them. One of the things that's important for the police culture to understand about the African American culture is that there's no way that protect and serve can happen in the African American culture without relationships with leaders who have grown up in the African American culture and who pastor the African American culture. And while I'm on this, I need to say something here. It is the job of the police department to protect and serve. But I want to tell you something. There are many in African American culture who are tired of being policed. It's too many in the African American culture are letting me know that what they feel like they're not feeling like they're being protected and served. They're approached just as being policed. And that's dangerous because, see, the origin of the police notion in America was born in Scotland Yard. And how we carry out this notion of policing, it was not designed to do what it's doing. It was actually designed to protect the property of white slave owners from the damaging pillaging of people that they considered dangerous, like Nat Moore or Nat Turner. Policing, as we began to first receive it on American shores from Scotland Yard, which is why you see when there's a police death, there are bagpipes from Scotland played, because the origins of the police department, policing as we know it, functionally came from Scotland Yard in London. Now, what I'm trying to get over right here is protecting and serving is a little different from policing. And often when you're policing, what you're doing is approaching like there is a crime. When you're protecting and serving, you come into a situation trying to figure out how you can protect somebody from a crime. If a police officer assumes that if a black person is involved, they need to investigate what the black person has done first, then we run the risk of being policed, and people who are constantly policed end up nervous about the police. And nervous people make bad mistakes sometimes or do things they wouldn't ordinarily do if they didn't feel that they were being constantly watched. Sometimes you get a reaction from people who feel they're being constantly watched or constantly policed that you wouldn't get if they were feeling like when they saw police, they were going to get protected instead of policed. Let me show you what I mean. So I go into a hardware store a couple days ago, and I'm talking on the phone to one of my trustees. I have my Bluetooth in my ear, but I walk in the door, and I'm holding my phone in my hand, but I'm talking through the Bluetooth. I'm talking to one of my trustees about a situation that's happening at our church as we prepare when we're going to go back from the pandemic. I walk into this store, and there is one of the workers, a female worker. I distinctly remember her being short and petite, and she was Caucasian. She was pushing a cart back into the racks. When I came in the door from the sidewalk, I was talking. When I walked in, I stood there talking. I didn't walk over to the racks because of the carts because of social distancing. So she was pushing the cart in, and I stayed my 6 feet back, but I was actually more than 6 feet back, but I'm talking on the phone. She turned and stared at me for about 5 seconds. So after these seconds, I said, "Ma'am, can I help you? Do you need something? I'm just wondering what you're doing." I said, "What do you mean? What am I doing? I'm waiting for you to move so I can come into the distance and get a cart." She said, "Well, were you talking to me?" I said, "No, ma'am, I'm on the phone." "Well, I didn't know that." I said, "Well, did I need to tell you I was on the phone when I walked in the store?" She said, "No, I just wanted to know what you were saying and what you were doing." I said, "Now, what is it that would make you wonder what I'm saying and what I'm doing when I walked in the store holding the phone in my hand and there are other people in the phone that I hear talking on their phone?" Here is the real truth. A 6'3" black man walked in wearing a mask and had a black object in his hand, and when you turned around, you were startled because you were more often than not, you are prepared for me to be doing something wrong with something black in my hand and a mask on my face. You forgot for that instant, it's COVID. All you have to do is turn around and look. You never have to open your mouth. You will see that I have a phone in my hand, a mask on my face. I'm wearing a 3-piece suit with a bow tie on. So what are the odds I'm in to do some mayhem? But her first reaction was one of fear. One of fear. So her first thought was to police me rather than to just do her job, which is work in the store. I can, and there's some people listening to me right now, some black and some white. I hope that the people who are listening to me who are white pay attention to what I'm saying. Because I'm not saying all white people are trying to police black people. But I hope the black ones understand and help others understand what I mean by being policed. I mean being followed in a store just because I'm in there. Or to be pulled over and not given a ticket. But you can't explain why you pulled me over. Or to walk up to me and look me up and down before you ask me if you could help me. To make sure I don't have a weapon or something like that. Or to be pulled over for a traffic stop and to be asked, do I have any weapons? Why should you assume that I have weapons because I've been pulled over? I don't believe that every time a police officer pulls over a person that they ask them, do they have a weapon? Now, so I believe that there needs to be a relationship relative to social justice between the police and leaders in the black community so that the police can be better equipped to do their job. Let me make this statement perfectly clear. I have nothing against police. I have everything against racism. If all of the police in Indianapolis decided to pack up and leave, I would say, hold up, I'm going with you. Because I don't want to be in a place where there is no protect and serve and no law and any order. But I also don't want to have to constantly live in a place where racism rules how protection and service takes place. Let me tell you something. Injustice anywhere, according to M.L. King, is a threat to justice everywhere. There can be no real social justice if we take time out and decide we're going to get out of the game until people act better, or we're going to only get involved with certain issues. I heard somebody say the other day, I don't like these preachers that only get involved or get on TV when something happens. That's one of the most ignorant statements you can make. Here's why. You don't know what somebody's doing because you don't see them. You don't know what somebody's doing behind the scenes. You don't know how many times they're met with the mayor or met with the chief of police or met with other organizations. You don't know that there have not been more questionable shootings because of what's going on that you don't see. Because as you know, the greatest work, what makes your body great is not what we see on the outside. It's what you can't see that's working on the inside. What makes a team great is not how they look on TV during the game, but what you don't see that's happening in practice. Stop making comments about how much somebody else is doing social justice and mind your own social justice business. Put your mind on what you're doing, because the best or worst social justice worker you know for sure is you. Either you're a good one or a bad one, and that's all you can control. That is our show today. God bless your heart. This has been Moves That Matter. I'm your host, Dr. Clyde Posley Jr. I welcome your comments down in the bottom. You know how I'm going to end the show. I'm going to ask you to hit share, and I'm going to tell you this. You are always in life making moves. Since you're making moves, why don't you make your moves that matter? God bless you. I'm going to see you next week. I love you and appreciate you.